Edgy humor is a difficult thing to get right. If done well, it tastefully combines shock humor and the subversion of expectations to leave you with a hearty chuckle. But if done wrong, it comes off as immature and irritating. The jokes can't be so family-friendly that they lack any bite, but they also can't be so grotesquely juvenile that they twist your back up into a corkscrew. Of all the many attempts to bridge the gap between the two, I think that few series do it better than The Addams Family. It's a perfect example of how you can have a very light tone but still manage to pull off dark humor in a very crowd-pleasing way. But not all entries into this franchise have been good, and from the look of things, the subpar quality of these films has only gotten worse. But how did this once great series devolve into plodding, screeching, ear-clawing nonsense? Or in other words, what happened to The Addams Family? Let's find out. Oh yeah, and blanket spoiler warning for everything in the Addams Family franchise. It all began in 1938 as a comic strip created by Charles Addams, who the titular family is named after. Charles was a cartoonist who currently holds the world record for most instantly intriguing profile picture on Wikipedia, and was known for creating characters with a very dark and morbid sense of humor. Charles was a tried-and-true edgelord who lived the type of life you'd expect from someone who created a world like the Addams Family. He supposedly slept in a bed fashioned from a coffin and got married in a cemetery, although if you know much about the man, you'll know that he loved to spread dubious rumors about himself in order to make him seem more strange than he probably was in real life. I mean, unless you believe that he actually received severed fingers and human organs in the mail from his fans, which is something that he actually claimed to have had happen. The series focuses on the Addams Family, a wealthy but extremely strange, violent, and sociopathic bunch who regularly engage in the most horrific acts of cruelty imaginable. Furthermore, the Addams Family seem to have some ability to perform magic, although it's never really explained what they are exactly. Vampires, witches, it's anybody's guess, really. Despite the success of the cartoons, it would be 26 years from the inception of the world until its first on-screen adaptation, which came in the form of the Addams Family 1964 TV show. A respectable first entry to be sure, but it's not without its problems. In this version, the Addams Family lives in a suburban neighborhood rather than their haunted house on a hill, and the show mainly revolves around their various encounters with neighbors and other members of the town. The show set in stone many of the tropes that would come to be associated with the franchise, including the iconic score by Vic Mizzy. The cast is very hit or miss for me. I love this show's version of Gomez, who remains to this day my personal favorite portrayal of the character. Played by John Astin, this character is pretty much the definitive version of Gomez to me, and that's high praise considering Tim Curry tackled this role at one point, but more on that later. I love how enthusiastic John is in this role. You can tell he's having a blast every second. His contagious charisma, extremely expressive face, and never-ending energy easily land him the #1 spot for me in terms of the characters here.
Typical case, the more they need help, the harder they fight it.
However, not all the cast is so well done. I'm really not a fan of this show's version of Fester, whose high-pitched voice is extremely grating.
You're standing right in my way.
He's also not very well characterized, especially not in comparison to later portrayals, and he really seems to just morph into completely different people over the course of the show. Is he a naive idiot who doesn't understand the ramifications of his crimes, or is he an evil monster who deliberately commits them? Depends on the episode. It's kind of novel that his habit of lighting light bulbs with his mouth led to a gag that you can still buy today, but I really don't like this version of the character. I also feel that Wednesday is among the worst characters in this version, but it's not because of her actress necessarily, it's because of the direction and the writing. Wednesday just isn't Wednesday in this version. She's way too genuinely sweet and innocent and doesn't even remotely remind me of the character she's supposed to be. I think that one of the major problems with this character specifically comes from the fact that she's only 6 years old in this version, while the character of Wednesday is canonically more than twice that age. In the original comics, Wednesday's 13, and I like to think, by the way, that's one of the main reasons that the whole 13-year-olds are edgy stereotype came about. A 13-year-old actress could at least understand the nuances of dark humor enough to understand how best to portray a sinister character. Meanwhile, a 6-year-old hasn't even gotten to fractions yet. But Wednesday is only a symptom of the real problem with this show, and that's the fact that it's weighed down with the censorship of its day. This show is like one dial darker than Andy Griffith, and that's not a good sign right off the bat. Like I said in the beginning, dark humor can't be too far in either direction or else it ceases to be funny, and this show definitely lies in the too family-friendly category. I can't blame the writers for this problem, however, and I feel like they probably would have done more to give this show some teeth if it wasn't for the strict suppression of media at the time. If you want a really in-depth look at how ridiculous censorship got during the 1960s, watch some of Rod Serling, the creator of the Twilight Zone's interviews. Not to put too fine a point on it, but during one episode they had to ADR over an actor's line because he ordered tea, and the show was sponsored by a coffee company. So they forced Rod to redo the scene with the actor ordering coffee instead. Overall, I'd say this show does a pretty good job of introducing us to this world, and despite my gripes, it still does manage to have some pretty funny jokes.
Look, ladies, this is no time for jokes, huh? Now tell me who's missing and give me your address, please.
My name is Mrs. Adams, and I want you to find my little girl Wednesday.
Look, I'll find her Tuesday if I can, but don't give me no deadlines, will you, please?
It's one of the better examples of tongue-in-cheek humor I can think of from the era, honestly. It's just that the humor doesn't fit with the tone of the original. One of the things I also appreciate about this show is the fact that oftentimes you think the joke's over and then they just hit you one more time.
Wednesday's her name.
Oh, and I suppose you're going to tell me her middle name is Thursday, huh?
Friday.
I think one of the things that really makes this especially difficult for me to tackle in any objective way is the fact that I have such nostalgia for the 1990s films, and in my mind those are sort of the definitive versions of the characters. In that regard, this show is similar to Little Shop of Horrors, where the remake is so incredibly well done and masterful that people forget how side-splittingly hilarious the original version was.
Look, honey, soon we got no more Skid Row. We will be rich, us. I am building for you a giant greenhouse in which you are making impossible flowers, which in turn I am selling at ridiculous prices in my giant new flower saloon in Beverly Hills. Do you see that big sign in the sky? It is saying, Gravis Mushnik in French. I can see it all now. We are in the poorhouse. That big sign in the sky, it is reading, Seymour Krelboyne, rest in peace, in Arabic!
If nothing else, this show offers some pretty good laughs, and John Astin's performance is enough to carry the whole thing. It's worth a watch if you've got the time. Okay, that ought to put a pretty sizable dent in our retrospective. Let's see here, that's one down and 9 more to go. Oh boy. Now, this will be as thorough an examination as I can muster, but I'm not going to cover literally everything the Addams Family has ever been in. I mean, I hope you all can forgive me for not including an in-depth analysis of the Scooby-Doo special, but we will take a look at every single TV show and film adaptation ever made, so let's press on. In 1972, a pilot was produced by ABC for a new Addams Family musical, but it was ultimately never picked up as a full-fledged series. Rather, the Addams Family would continue on with their first animated series instead. This adaptation of the Addams Family came to us as The Addams Family 1973, 9 years after the first show. The good news for time's sake is that I have very little to say about it other than it's terrible. Let's see if I can sell anyone on this, because apparently a board of executives was sold on this premise. So you know how the Addams Family is about this creepy ensemble cast grounded in their spooky mansion, and how the show has, since its inception, and in every other version ever, been a sitcom? Well, this show decided to instead make the Addams Family a show about driving around in a car. I'm not kidding. Throughout the entire show, they're just driving around in a car. Oh yeah, and everything else about it is horrible too. They made the characters look a lot more like their comic book counterparts for this show. It doesn't make it good though. I feel like I need to apologize to Uncle Fester for saying that his voice in the 1964 show was annoying, by the way, because I've never heard a more annoying voice in my life than Lenny Weinrib as Gomez.
Oh, can you forgive me, Carita? I thought you were in the arms of a strange man.
I sat through 8 hours of this. I hope you can sympathize with me. So aside from the show being really stupid, it's also really boring. You know, the lack of sophisticated special effects in the 1960s meant our last version couldn't really explore much of the Addams family's more magical inclinations, but this show does that in spades. In fact, this show pulls off an incredible magic trick, which is the fact that it manages to make 30 minutes feel like 5 hours. It seems like the bulk of the world agreed with me, thankfully, and this show was cancelled after only 16 episodes, which makes it the shortest running Addams Family TV show out of all of them. I mean, come on, the show doesn't even have the iconic theme song. It's not worth your time. That's really all I have to say about this. Other than a 1977 TV special, we wouldn't get another Addams Family installment for 18 years. Now, this special is pretty serviceable. I mean, it basically is just a long episode of the 64 show, and most of the original cast returns, so that's pretty cool. But there's not really much I have to say about this that I didn't already say about the 64 show. In 1991, it arrived. What I will simply call the Addams Family. I think it's pretty much universal that when most people think of the Addams Family, this is the one that comes to mind. Although John Astin is my favorite version of Gomez, to me, this is really the ultimate cast. Raul Julia plays a magnificent Gomez in this film and absolutely channels the enthusiasm of his 1964 counterpart, and Angelica Houston plays such a fantastic Morticia Addams that, to me, there really isn't any room for a second runner-up. Christopher Lloyd's Uncle Fester is far and away the best and most heavily characterized version of any of the previous entries, and is probably the most entertaining to me. The fact that they really play up how jerky and awkward he is while also making him so bombastic and full of energy means it's hard to be bored anytime he's on screen. But I think that more than anything, people praise this film's version of Wednesday, portrayed by Christina Ricci. She's become so iconic, as a matter of fact, that ever since this film was released, she's basically been the flagship character of the entire franchise. Now, I can't say I depart from the crowd on this one, because this film's Wednesday is my absolute favorite.
What game? It's called... Is There a God?
Ricci was pretty heavily involved in the development of the character, and even came up with the idea that she would sleep with her arms crossed like a corpse in a casket. Ricci manages to be one of the few examples of a fantastic child actor, and her performance speaks volumes of director Barry Sonnenfeld's talents and coaxing memorable performances from the cast. Now, I usually don't go much into the creators of the various media I review here because I think it's largely irrelevant. I mean, no matter the morals or past regarding a studio, the film stands or falls on its own merits. But this is probably the only chance I'll ever get to talk about him, so I will now introduce a brief segment I call Leave Barry Sonnenfeld Alone. So for those of you who don't know, Barry Sonnenfeld is a director known for making live-action films with a very cartoonish look and feel, and I mean that in the best possible way. The sets and acting are filled with this glorious, campy, silly attitude that makes them all wildly entertaining. Barry found moderate success with the Addams Family and Addams Family Values, which I promise we'll get back to very quickly, and after a few more moderate hits, he seemed to be an ascendant filmmaker with the enormous success of Men in Black, which landed him into superstar status. However, 2 years after, he released Wild Wild West, a film that was basically universally hated. The film won 15 Golden Raspberries and coaxed some of the most hyperbolic criticism I've ever seen for a movie. But I will come to your defense, Barry, because these people don't know what they're talking about. One of the main problems critics had with this film was that Kenneth Branagh's performance was too over the top, which, that's fair. I mean, if there's one role that could really use more subtlety, it's most definitely the character who's a Confederate cyborg.
Don't you just hate that song?
It's also really funny that everybody loved the exact same performance when it came out of Hollywood's most exclusive lover 13 years later.
It's me, dear friends, alive and kicking. Well, alive anyway.
I heard you've been telling everybody that Mandingos ain't no damn good. Ain't nothing nobody is selling is worth buying. I'm curious. What makes you such a Mandingo expert?
But I digress. Basically, Wild Wild West ruined Barry's career forever, and since then he's been saddled with the most laughably awful premises you can imagine. On the infinitesimal chance that Barry Sonnenfeld likes to watch cartoon animals review films and he's watching this right now, just know I'll always love you, Barry. But back to the reason for this video's existence. The Addams Family 1991 follows a fairly conventional plot for the series, as you'll see later on. You see, Uncle Fester's left the house several years ago following a fight between him and Gomez, and ever since then the family's tried to use dark magic to bring him back. The family lawyer Tully owes money to loan sharks Abigail and Gordon, and concocts a scheme to steal money from the Addams family in order to pay off his debts. You see, Abigail's son inexplicably looks like Uncle Fester. I mean, not even just that his face kind of resembles the man, I mean, he literally has Uncle Fester's corpse-white skin and Tim Burton-level circles under his eyes. Now, they do explain this later on, but very unsatisfactorily, to say the least. The film goes as you'd expect, with Gordon almost getting caught several times in the cat-and-mouse game throughout the runtime, all the while trying to steal the Addams family's gold out from under their nose. But the film kind of loses me right at the 2/3 mark. Seemingly out of nowhere, Gordon begins to develop feelings for the two kids. It's not even hinted at any other point in the film that he cares much for any of them other than draining the coffers and hitting the road, and so this just kind of comes out of left field. I mean, you'd think this would be something to lead up to and a slow burn, but it just kind of happens out of the clear blue sky. Eventually, Gordon learns that Fester is the rightful heir to the estate since he's the older brother, and so he kicks the family out on the orders of his mom. The family is forced to get normal jobs for a brief time before taking the house back over and launching Abigail and Tully into an open grave. The most ponderous part of this entire film is yet to come, however, as the film seemingly ends right after this. I know what you're thinking, right? Where's the real Fester? What happened to Gordon? Did they ever find out the scheme, or is Gordon just going to live as a doppelganger in this stranger's family home for the rest of his life? Well, never you worry, because the film has an explanation. After the film is apparently over, we cut to a screen that reads 7 months later. On Halloween night, the Addamses reveal to the audience that this is apparently the real Fester. Yeah, you heard me right. Supposedly, he got lost in the Bermuda Triangle and was rescued by a fisherman, and then somehow managed to get amnesia and impersonate some random woman's son. Don't think about it too much or you might have an aneurysm. So look, I know I said this is my favorite incarnation of the franchise, and while that's true, it's really referring to this film's sequel, which is superior in basically every way. I mean, I still love the sight gags and near omnipresent dark humor draped over the film, but the plot just kind of loses me. Before we can talk about the sequel to this film, however, for the sake of chronology, we must first take a look at the 1992 television show. Produced by Hanna-Barbera, the 1992 TV show brings us easily the best animated Addams Family show of all time. John Astin returns as Gomez for some very welcome nostalgia, and we get a pretty satisfactory voice cast all around. My particular favorite out of the bunch is Wednesday, voiced by Debbie Derryberry, known for voicing Jimmy Neutron, and believe me, we will get to that in time. But I really like the show's Wednesday, and she's my personal second favorite, only behind the Ricci performance. Debbie does a great job making the character seem both childishly ignorant of her cruelty while still obviously making her seem menacing. It's pretty similar to a later character she would also portray in Grim Adventures. I mean, even the voice she uses is extremely similar to this one.
Use some creative problem solving and get an A on our assignment. About so high? Looks kind of like this.
Like I said, though, all the voice cast is at least decent. I mean, even this show's Uncle Fester is less nasally than previous interpretations. But to me, a surprising standout is Pugsley, who, even in the better versions of the series, is somewhat forgettable and is actually one of the better characters here. Most of the time, he's kind of the straight man, the one who questions whether the cruelty of the family is actually necessary, but in this one, he's no such thing. Funny enough, Pugsley's probably the most evil character in this whole show. The sibling rivalry that usually consists of Wednesday tormenting Pugsley is actually a lot more evened out here. I appreciate that this show made a bold choice to change up the cast a bit in that regard. Easily the best thing about this show is the fact that it really surprisingly embraces a darker tone than I would have thought, and there's allusions to all sorts of adult themes throughout it.
But wait a while before letting us down, children. Your father and I are just getting uncomfortable.
But it also manages to do epic random type humor in a way that's much better than most other media, and I won't lie, it got me every time.
I was kind of wondering if, maybe you guys could tell me what to say to her?
Elementary, my boy. Just raise an eyebrow and give her the old Addams smile.
Perfect.
Then toss a live Wolverine on her and watch the sparks fly.
This one won me over, and despite some strange changes to the characters' costumes, I really enjoyed it. Funny enough, this was actually the first ever cartoon made by Hanna-Barbera to air every Sunday, making this officially their first ever true Sunday morning cartoon. So finally, we have arrived. The greatest Addams Family film of all time. 1993's Addams Family Values. All my gripes about the 1991 film melt away with this one. The plot is golden, the villain is leagues better, and this film is a whole lot funnier. So the basic plot is that the family has a new son named Pubert, which is actually the name they give him in the comic too. Fun fact, by the way, this is not actually a boy. The baby in this film was played by two twin baby girls. You know how I love my trivia. Wednesday and Pugsley, however, are jealous of the baby, and so they try various gory methods of murdering him. That's a plotline I felt was sorely missing from the Boss Baby. After getting fed up with their children trying to murder their newborn son, the Addamses decide to hire a babysitter named Debbie Jelinski, the best villain in the entire franchise, far and away. Joan Cusack as Debbie is not only my favorite part of this whole film, she's probably my favorite character to come out of this entire franchise. It's the only time that an Addams Family villain is so devilishly sadistic and psychotic that even the titular family seem like saints in comparison.
Would you do anything for me?
Anything.
Would you die for me?
Yes.
Promise.
She flows perfectly between being sickeningly sweet and maniacally insane, and every scene she's in manages to captivate your attention. Even amongst a cast of extremely expressive characters, I feel like Debbie takes the cake in this department. It's almost immediately revealed that Debbie is a serial killer called Black Widow who murders rich bachelors to steal their money, unlike that other Black Widow who just murders her career prospects. Wednesday is instantly suspicious of Debbie, and so in order to keep her scheme from being uncovered, she convinces Gomez and Morticia to send them to a summer camp. This is something I felt was sorely lacking from the previous film, namely a B-plot, unless you count that 5 minutes worth of time in the last movie where the family has to get normal jobs before almost immediately returning to their house, which I don't. This particular B-plot is excellently done as we get one of the better examples of a fish-out-of-water story with the juxtaposition of these two horribly disturbed psychopaths mixed in with a sickeningly wholesome environment. Debbie spins her web around Fester and they get married about 2 days after meeting each other, which is usually a good sign for a long, healthy relationship. But on their honeymoon, Debbie tries to kill Fester by throwing a radio into the bathtub. This begs the question of how exactly she's gotten away with her crimes for so long if she uses her real name and also murders her husband's literal days after they get married. I mean, I've seen an episode of Forensic Files where a fiber from a Sesame Street sweater led to a conviction, so it stretches credulity to assume this woman would go longer than 2 days without getting captured. But then again, we are talking about a franchise with a sentient, disembodied hand and a baby that spits flaming arrows, so maybe it wasn't meant to be so thoroughly scrutinized. In the end, following the most hilarious scene in the entire movie involving Wednesday's Thanksgiving play, the kids rebel against the camp counselors and escape. Debbie kidnaps the family and tries to electrocute them, but thanks to Pubert messing with the wires, she ends up shocking herself instead. Everyone gets their happy ending, and we leave with Fester finding a new girl. If you're gonna watch any of these movies, make it this one. No other adaptation so perfectly translates cartoon physics into a live-action setting while still giving you a perfect little snippet of what this series is at its best. A goofy, dark sitcom with an outrageous premise. I think Barry Sonnenfeld was the best man for the job when it comes to adapting these kinds of films, and it's one of his best to be sure. I can't promise it'll change your life, but The Addams Family Values is entertaining from start to finish, and at the end of the day, what more can you ask from this franchise than that? Now, I wish I could say that this was it, and we could all leave on a happy note of being able to say we wrapped this series up on a positive thumbs up. But unfortunately, that's not the case. It wouldn't be a What Happened To episode without ending on the worst of the worst, and let me tell you, there's plenty of that. If you thought the 1973 show was bad, just wait until you see what's up next, because, to put it mildly, it's only downhill from here. The next two impressively awful additions to this franchise were both released within a month of each other, so we'll start with the TV show. The New Addams Family 1998. So apparently this one actually has its defenders, but for the life of me I can't understand why. This show sucks so bad. Okay, so first of all, it's all the way slanted to the family-friendly side. There's basically no edge to the show whatsoever, and as a result, it stumbles right at the starting line and never recovers. The worst casualty of the show is definitely Gomez, who loses all of his superhuman competence and charm, which is instead replaced with this bumbling caricature of a bad 90s sitcom dad. A great example of what a head-scratcher this show is that at one point, Gomez gets hit in the head, and the only way that they could think to convey to us that he has amnesia now is that he starts talking like a bargain bin mobster with gabagool dripping down his chin.
We gotta do something about these kids of ours. Come on, hon, walk with me, talk with me. They look like they never seen the light of day. They need fresh air, they need team sports.
You like, what's that movie you like so much? About spaghetti, meatballs or something?
But he's not even the worst character in this show. I mean, Uncle Fester, who I'm starting to think is just a cursed character, is absolutely awful in this show. His makeup is the worst to date, and overall he's just insufferable. The only character who's somewhat redeemable in this show is Wednesday, played by an actress who is indecipherable from Fairuza Balk in Return to Oz. Believe it or not, that is not the same person. I mean, I'll give this show 1 point for not having the stomach-churning trope of the laugh track, something that the 1964 counterpart can't say. You know, that thing that shows like to do to patronize you as if you're too stupid to know that you were just told a joke. It's like the here comes the plane of adulthood. John Astin returns in the form of a new character for this show called Grandpa Adams, and he's a welcome presence that alleviates some of the tedium of watching this, but even he can't save it. Apparently, Alexandra Daddario and Josh Peck auditioned for the roles of Pugsley and Wednesday, who is interestingly enough about the same age as Drake Bell's preferred dating pool. But the unforgivable lack of anything I'd call dark in this show makes it so that this doesn't even really count in my world as an Addams Family property. It's not just boring, it's cringy boring, where you can't just let it run in the background without hearing some overly childish nonsense that makes you wonder why this ever even got off the cutting room floor. If you're a completionist, it's still not worth it. The Addams Family Reunion. Okay, so real talk here. We all know where this is going. You know that in the end, this train pulls up to the 2019 station, and obviously that's going to be the worst incarnation of the entire series, right? Well, boy, I sure thought so. But no. No! Even the 2019 film, terrible as it is, and believe me, we'll get to how offensively stupid that film is, it can't even hold a candle to this movie. This is among the worst films I have ever seen, and I mean that. This movie made me sick. I wasn't expecting it to be good, but I definitely didn't expect this. Okay, so I guess let's just get into it. When I started this movie, no joke, I thought someone had pulled a prank on me. It wasn't until Tim Curry appeared that I realized this is the actual film. The movie starts, and I kid you not, with a scene of a mailman delivering a box that goes on for 4 minutes. 4 minutes of this. The problems start right away, and believe me, they don't get any better. The acting is worse than a sci-fi original, let me tell you. Goosebumps looks worthy of an Emmy next to this one. But that's not the only problem. Look at this hideous Mars Attacks level CGI, and take a good look too. Because they really want you to see this special effect, since they put it right in the forefront for like 2 whole minutes. Also, why is everything so overexposed? Every shot in this film looks like this. It's so blown out it hurts your eyes. This is the Addams Family. It's supposed to be dark and dreary and goth, not Backstreet Boys in heaven. Literally every single shot in this movie looks ugly. I don't know what the production budget of this film was because the budget isn't listed anywhere, but I can't imagine it was very high if this scene is anything to go on. I mean, look at this. What is this? What is this? They're in a real room, but for some unknown and perhaps unknowable reason, Gomez is standing behind a green screen? Why? Was there not a real wall you could get him to stand behind? Does this room not have 4 walls? And it's not just this scene either. There's countless times in this movie where characters just stand behind green screens despite the fact that there's an obvious real-life environment behind them. With only one exception, every single actor in this film is bad. And I'm convinced it's because Dave Payne is the worst director of all time. I mean, not that I wouldn't expect Oscar-worthy performances to be coaxed from the man who directed Alien Terminator. But seriously, I blame him for this cast being so awful because there are some incredibly talented people in this film. Wednesday is portrayed by the same actress as the new Addams Family, but she's way worse in this film. Morticia Addams is played by Daryl Hannah, who is an immensely talented actress and a brilliant, composed, intelligent woman. But in this film, she looks like a vacuous valley girl. The entire film, she has this look on her face that I can only describe as woman whose greatest tragedy in life was buying lipstick that didn't match her foundation. Tim Curry isn't spared the wrath either. Tim Curry, one of my greatest idols and among the bravest people to ever grace the silver screen. This man who's played some of the most iconic roles in film history, Frankenfurter, Darkness, Pennywise. But he's so stilted and awkward in this film. He really seems like he's uncomfortable the whole time, like he just wants to go and ask the director if he can go home yet. So I bet you thought I was going to say that Tim Curry was the best part of this movie, didn't you? I mean, everybody else seems to think so. But no. You know who that one exception was that I mentioned earlier? Lurch. And you know why? Because he doesn't speak. I have further proof that all of this falls on the director's shoulders, by the way. Like, for example, hey Dave, do you know what choreography is? It's when you have a pre-rehearsed set of movements for your characters where they walk around and interact with their environment. And that's actually a real option on the table here. You don't have to just have your actors stand there totally still for the entire duration of a scene, which happens a staggering number of times in this film. There are so many unbelievably stupid decisions in this movie that it's hard to bear. For example, this film introduces 9 new characters, all of whom are members of the Addams family, but then they also decided to make the main villain, who was not related to the family by blood in any way, Dr. Addams. Just to piss me off, I guess. Okay, so the plot of this movie is every bit as nonsensical and stupid as everything else about it, so I guess we might as well just get to it. Along the way, I'd like you to try and think of a more confusing and idiotic plot to a film that you've ever heard. So the Addams family learn that their grandparents have come down with a disease that makes them normal, and so Gomez decides to have a family reunion in order to find a cure to the disease. Along the way, a doctor decides to scam his father out of his inheritance, but the Addams family accidentally causes a machine at the post office to malfunction because they wrote the letter in blood, which results in the family being sent to a hotel where Dr. Addams is also planning a family reunion in order to kill his father. A further mix-up leads the other Addams family to accidentally wind up in the Addams family mansion where they get scammed out of all their money in a poker match. Meanwhile, Pugsley falls in love with a girl whom he believes to be his cousin, and Dr. Addams says that he'll only help Gomez cure his grandparents if Gomez can beat him in a game of darts, tennis, and table tennis, which he does. Instead of helping Gomez like he said, however, Dr. Addams tries to stab Gomez to death in public. But Gomez gets the knife away from him, and the police arrive and arrest Gomez and Morticia for attempted murder, despite the fact that there are several eyewitnesses to the fact that Gomez wasn't even involved in the fight, and Dr. Addams is very much the only aggressor in this situation. So then Walter, Dr. Addams' father, who he was trying to kill in the first act, I think, that was his motivation, right? Well, he bails the Addamses out of jail, and then they tie Dr. Addams to an electric chair and the patients in the hospital he works for murder him. So then this little pot that Grandpa gave Pugsley at the very beginning of the movie is revealed to be a micro-scale nuclear warhead that is for some reason in the shape of a small brass pot, and also gets armed for absolutely no reason. Then it explodes, and Gomez and Morticia kiss, and that is the end of the movie. I'm not kidding, that's actually the end of the movie. Oh, and that plot point about the grandparents getting sick and needing a cure, you know, the entire catalyst for the plot, it's just never resolved. They just send the grandparents away at the end of the film before the nuke explodes. Still sick. I hate this movie. I hate everything about this movie. There is so much in it that is just set up with absolutely no payoff. Fester makes a mutated dog for Pugsley. Why? Wednesday and Pugsley are sent to live with foster parents for 2 seconds. Why? To waste your time, that's why. The whole imposter trying to get the Addams family's money is a perfectly acceptable plot from this series. I mean, let's face it, that's pretty much the only plot they ever use for this show. But I've never seen it so confusingly put to screen. I'm done with this movie. That's it. That's all I have to say. In 2010, it was revealed that there was a new animated Addams Family film in the works that would have been done in stop motion. It was going to be made by Illumination, with Tim Burton as a director in his television directorial debut. Now, maybe I could have gotten excited for this if this was Corpse Bride era Tim Burton, but the fact that by this point he'd already defiled my favorite musical of all time means I couldn't summon much grief to hear about this one getting cancelled in 2013. In 2019, we got our latest, although not our final addition to the Addams Family brand. Now, I'll be honest, when I first heard about this, I was kind of sold. I mean, a modern-day animated Addams Family movie sounded like a great idea to me. And then when I heard that Charlize Theron and Snoop Dogg were going to be in the same movie together, you could chalk me up as a first-day ticket buyer. But that all changed when I saw this. Alright, look, I know that these designs are supposed to be closer to the original, and yeah, I understand that Wednesday had a long face in the comics, but why does she look like Big Brain Sheen? I mean, the animation isn't even bad, it's just these freakishly disgusting character designs sap all the quality out of it. But you know what? I'm getting too negative. So let's get positive. First of all, I'll tell you the things I liked about the movie, and then we'll move on to the things that I don't like about it. So, I like the car. That's a really cool car. Plus it says Chaz 1938 on the license plate. That's fun. I like that it farts out purple smoke. That's pretty cool. I like that this film has the shortest runtime of any other film in the entire franchise. Okay, now let's get negative. This film has made me essentially lose all hope that the Addams Family will ever understand the tone that it's supposed to have ever again. Even the little quirks that the previous films put into the background to show that the Addams Family are creepy and macabre, while present in this film, don't make any sense at all. Like Morticia cutting off the tops of roses. Ooh, how weird. How dark. Wednesday chopping off the heads of her own dolls. Ooh, how spooky. Gomez eating coffee grounds with a spoon. What? All the other things that I mentioned suggest that these people are maladjusted to normal society. This suggests that this person has never been on Earth before. Why is he doing this? The plot is just as confusing and awful as everything else about the movie, so let's take a look at that. In this film, a TV show host named Mrs. Needler, okay, that's actually kind of clever, decides that the Addams Family isn't normal enough, so they have to join ordinary society, with the ultimate message being that you should be able to be yourself. What a horrible message for an Addams Family movie. I can't think of a worse message for this franchise. Be yourself? Be yourself? The Addams Family isn't ostracized because of some benign, immutable characteristic about themselves. They're ostracized because they're demon-worshipping, cannibalistic serial killers. If you add up the death toll in the 90s properties alone, then this would be the most prolific group of serial killers in human history. They kidnap and torture people. They torture and kill small animals for fun. They're evil, and that's fine, because evil characters are oftentimes pretty funny. I mean, the Addams Family is basically the Always Sunny Seinfeld premise taken to the utmost extreme. But furthermore, this property doesn't need a message. It's a dumb sitcom about an evil family that does horrible things. That's all you need. And if you're going to put a message in your film, it shouldn't be, it's okay to be a murderer. I mean, this film has Lorax 2012 levels of not understanding the point, but in this case, I don't even understand what the conflict of interest was. Anyway, do I even need to go through the plot? I mean, I imagine you could already tell me every single thing that happens in this film, even if you haven't seen it, because it's predictable, boring, and forgettable. Well, other than the numerous scenes of Fester screaming that make you wish this character would just be excised from the plot at this point, because we're gunning 1 for 8 right now when it comes to good Festers. Needless to say, they defeat the evil woman and everybody gets what they want. Except for the audience. Also, Snoop Dogg doesn't get any actual lines in this movie, and I was very sad about that. Finally, we're at the end. The Addams Family 2021. This film commits the worst sin that any film can. And that's the fact that it is so boring that I cannot even express to you how disappointed I am that I spent money on this. Also, you have to put up with looped footage here because I can't risk using footage from a film that's still in theaters because they will definitely strike my channel. But let me tell you, this one takes the cake for being the most boring thing I had to watch for this entire 9-episode bender. Not only that, they decided to use the premise of the 1973 show for this movie. It's the Addams Family road trip, everybody. So you get to see the Addams Family driving around in their spooky RV. Oh yeah, there's this guy named Dr. Strange. Nope, not that one. Or that one. This one. This guy who looks like his character model isn't finished being rendered. He's the bad guy. And he wants to make animal-human hybrids. That's his evil plan, which, I don't know, I mean, I can respect that. I only watched this movie one time, and that's all I'm ever going to watch of it, but suffice it to say, while not being the worst of the films on any objective level, this one was the worst for me personally. Because at least Addams Family Reunion was so awful that I was in shock, but this one is so boring I actually almost fell asleep several times while watching this. And it's not for a lack of jarring, out-of-place action scenes or terrible attempts at humor. It's just that by this point, the whole spirit of what this franchise is even supposed to be is completely deteriorated to the point where I might as well have been watching open season. The film made $71 million, but I have no idea what the budget was, so there's no way for me to tell if this is actually a success or not. I hope not. Please don't make me return to this ever again. We're getting yet another Addams Family property called Wednesday, a show that will be directed by Tim Burton. I guess he finally got the gig. So look to Netflix if you want to see this franchise further abused. But other than that, I don't really know what else there is to say here. I mean, let's look here. The Addams Family trademark has apparently produced a pinball machine that is the highest-selling pinball machine of all time. I mean, that's unexpected. Can you tell I'm done with this yet? But now to answer the question, what happened to the Addams Family? Okay, let's be honest here. This franchise wasn't the slow decline that so many others are. It had some real stinkers right off the bat. But ultimately, the problem I see with this franchise is that it was diluted down to the point where the thing that made it unique was no longer even applicable. The once dark and twisted family of psychos is now just a kind of goth family of social outcasts. Apparently the world ate it up, though, because the latest films have made hundreds of millions of dollars in total. So expect more of the same. And after all, in the spirit of the Addams Family, what could be spookier than that? Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, leave me a like, or dislike it if you didn't like it. Comments are greatly appreciated, and I promise I will do my best to respond to each and every one. If you want to help out this channel, the best thing you can possibly do is leave your thoughts below and give me a like. Subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you all soon. That's all for now.